the sky over Moire Secundus bled. For weeks, the hive world had been choking on the poison of sedition. Cults, festering in the sunless depths of the underhive, had erupted into open rebellion. Their chants to dark gods echoed through ventilation shafts and corroded corridors, a death rattle for a world already on its knees. The local enforcers, the arbitrators, fought a losing war, precinct by precinct, against a tide of mutated flesh and heretical fervor. They were holding the line, but the line was crumbling into dust. Then, the wound opened. It wasn't a subtle tear, but a violent, visceral rip in the fabric of reality itself. A maelstrom of impossible colors and raw chaos energy vomited forth. A swirling vortex of madness hanging over the tallest spires of Hive Primus. From this warp anomaly, a storm of blood and fire rained down, not as a metaphor, but as a literal, terrifying reality. Corrupted lightning struck the Hive spires, and the screams of the damned rode the unnatural winds. For the beleaguered defenders, it was the final, apocalyptic seal on their doom. The Chaos Gods had answered the calls of their followers. But from that same rift, something else emerged. Not a fleet of blasphemous vessels, or a legion of demons, but a single, solitary object. It streaked through the corrupted atmosphere like a vengeful meteor, wreathed in green. An orange fire, an emerald comet on a collision course with the deepest, most blighted sector of the Underhive. The impact was seismic. It shook the very foundations of the hive, a concussive blast that momentarily silenced the gunfire and the chanting. Miles deep in the industrial sump, where light was a forgotten memory, a crater, and from that crater, a figure rose. It was immense, clad in dark green armor that seemed to drink the meager light. The design was alien, brutalist, and utterly unfamiliar. It bore no aquila, no sigil of the Mechanicus, no mark of any known Space Marine chapter or Traitor Legion. Its helmet was a featureless T-shaped visor, glowing with an internal, baleful light. It moved with a purpose that was terrifying in its simplicity, an economy of motion that spoke of countless battles fought and won. Arbitrator Dolan Vex was the first to see it. His squad was pinned down, their barricade of plasteel barrels and rusted girders about to be overrun. The cultists were a writhing mass of rags, improvised blades, and mutated limbs. Their eyes burned with the unholy light of the warp, their mouths drooling promises of sacrifice. Vex had already sent his last report. His death was a certainty. He gripped his shotgun, ready to sell his life as dearly as possible. That's when the Green Giant arrived. It didn't emerge from the shadows. It strode into the kill zone, as if it owned it. One moment, the corridor was filled with the horde. The next, the armored figure was among them. It carried a double-barreled weapon of a design Vex had never seen, its twin muzzles wide enough to swallow a man's fist. The weapon roared, a sound like thunder-tearing sheet metal, and the front rank of cultists simply vanished, reduced to a red mist and scorched pavement. The being didn't stop. It flowed through the enemy, a force of pure, kinetic violence. A blade of crimson energy extended from its wrist, shearing through bodies and improvised armor with contemptuous ease. It moved with a speed that defied its bulk, each punch shattering bone, each stomp crushing a heretic's skull. It was a whirlwind of destruction, silent, relentless, and utterly without mercy. The cultists, who had faced down bolter fire and flamethrowers with rapturous joy, broke. They screamed not in praise of their dark patrons, but in pure, primal terror. They tried to flee, but there was no escape. In less than a minute, the corridor was silent, save for the hum of the stranger's armor and the dripping of blood. Vex and his surviving arbitrators could only stare, their own weapons lowered. Before them stood a scene of absolute carnage. The Green Warrior stood impassively amidst the gore, its strange shotgun smoking. It then turned its helmeted gaze towards the arbitrators. There was no communication, no gesture of alliance or threat. There was only presence, a heavy, ancient, and terrifyingly powerful presence. Vex, his voice dry, keyed his vox. Command, this is Vex. We have a situation in Sector Gamonine. The cultist assault has been ... neutralized. He paused, struggling for words. By what? I don't know. It's not Imperial. It's not chaos. It's something else, something new. From the depths of the hive, a new sound began to rise. A guttural roar that was not human. Greater demons, summoned by the rift, were making their presence known. The armored figure turned its head towards the sound. A subtle, almost imperceptible tilt. It then began to walk, its heavy footfalls echoing a steady, rhythmic beat. It was a death knell. The stranger was not there to save Moire Secundus. It hadn't come to aid the Imperium or to fight for any cause Vex could comprehend. It had been drawn by the scent of chaos, by the presence of the demonic. It was a predator, and Tisive, this entire world, had just become its hunting ground. As Vex watched the figure disappear into the gloom, a single, chilling thought solidified in his mind. The wound in the sky had not just unleashed the horrors of the warp upon his world. It had also unleashed the one thing they feared. This wasn't a soldier or a warrior. This was a force of nature, a doom given form. He didn't know its name, its origin, or its purpose. But as the sounds of its brutal work began to echo back through the underhive, the roar of its strange weapons and the shrieks of dying demons, he knew one thing for sure. The game had changed. A new player was on the board, and it played by no rules but its own. Moire Secundus was still damned, but now, so were its tormentors. The hunt had just begun. Thank you so much for watching this dive into a potential crossover legend. What do you think would happen next? How would the Imperium react to this silent, green-armored force of destruction? Today, we're diving back into the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. But this time a new kind of fury has been unleashed upon the enemies of mankind. We're picking up right where we left off, in the blood-soaked hulls of a desecrated spire. This is Chapter 2. The Massacre in the Spire. The air, thick with the stench of incense and heresy, is now punctuated by the roar of a super shotgun and the wet crunch of shattered bone. The Chaos cultists who moments ago were reveling in their dark rituals are now little more than red mist and scattered viscera. The Vox recorder on Arbitrator Vex's armor captures the scene, not as a coherent picture, but as a chaotic symphony of destruction. Vex's body camera feed is a frantic, dizzying mess. It shows flashes of gore, a burst of plasma vaporizing a traitor, and then, for a split second, the unwavering, green-glowing visor of the being they call the Doomslayer. The feed cuts in and out, distorted by the sheer energy radiating from this entity. One moment, Vex is scrambling for cover behind a shattered pillar. The next, his optical sensors are whited out by the muzzle flash of a chain gun spinning at an impossible rate. The screams of the heretics are mercifully short. No demon screamed for long. Vex would later record in his log. That was the most terrifying part. These were fanatics, men and women who had dedicated their souls to the ruinous powers, ready to die for their dark gods. They had faced down space marines, battled Imperial guardsmen to bloody stalemates, and reveled in the face of death. But they weren't prepared for this. This wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. Through Vex's fragmented recording, we hear the sounds, the heavy, rhythmic thud of ceramite boots that sound less like a soldier walking and more like the tolling of a funeral bell. The distinctive, high-pitched whine of an energy weapon charging, followed by a deafening boom that liquefies everything in its path. And then there's the sound of his fists, the sickening crack as reinforced plasteel helmets are crushed like eggshells. The wet, tearing sound as his gaunted hands ripped through armor and flesh with equal, contemptuous ease. He doesn't just kill them, he unmakes them. The Arbites, hardened veterans of countless Hive City purges, can only watch. They are trained to be the unyielding fist of imperial law, paragons of brutal efficiency. But this is something else entirely. This isn't the cold, calculated warfare of the Astra Militarum, nor is it the righteous, zealous fury of the Adeptus. This is a singular, primal rage given form. To the Arbites huddled behind their riot shields, the Doomslayer is not human. He moves with a speed and ferocity that defies biology. He navigates the battlefield with a preternatural awareness, as if he can sense the exact location of every enemy, every threat, every target. He is a force of nature, a living calamity. He doesn't reload. He simply produces another weapon, each more devastating than the last. He doesn't tire. He doesn't slow. Only kills. From the perspective of the cultists, the experience is even more apocalyptic. They had summoned what they believed were demons, pleaded for the favor of their bloodthirsty gods. They had performed the rites, spilled the requisite blood, and offered up their souls for power. They expected demonic legions, blessings of mutation, or perhaps even the favor of a demon prince. Instead, they got him. He came from the void, wreathed in green light and righteous hatred, a being of pure, unadulterated violence. To them, he is the devil they once worshipped. A terrible irony. The very concept of hell they had so eagerly embraced had just manifested. But it wasn't there to reward them. It was there to punish them. Imagine their terror. You've spent your life whispering praises to Khorne, the blood god, begging for glorious slaughter. Suddenly, a figure appears who embodies slaughter more perfectly than any demon you have ever seen, and his attention is fixed solely on you. He is the ultimate predator, and you are nothing more than prey. Your profane weapons spark harmlessly off his armor. Your twisted, mutated champions are swatted aside like insects. The blessings of the warp curdle in his presence. He is anathema to everything you believe in. He is the great filter, the final, brutal answer to the question of heresy. Within minutes, the spire falls silent, save for the hum of overloaded power conduits and the slow drip of blood from the ceiling. Hundreds of cultists, a force that could have held off an entire Imperial Guard regiment for days, had been reduced to a thick, crimson carpet. Vex and his squad slowly emerge from their cover, their weapons still raised, though there is nothing left to shoot. The chamber is a charnel house. Banners of the ruinous powers are torn and trampled. Unholy altars are smashed into rubble, and in the center of it all, standing amidst the carnage, is the Doomslayer. He stands motionless for a moment, his head slowly scanning the room, ensuring no threat remains. The green light of his visor seems to bore into the very soul of anyone it passes over. He doesn't acknowledge the Arbites. To him, they are just part of the scenery, irrelevant to his one singular purpose. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he turns and marches towards a massive, reinforced blast door at the far end of the spire. He doesn't try the lock. He doesn't look for a control panel. He simply raises a fist and punches. The sound is like a thunderclap. The mythic adamantium door groans, buckles, and is torn from its hinges as if it were made of cardboard. Beyond it lies the path deeper into the hive, deeper into the heart of the corruption. Without a word, without a single backward glance, the Doomslayer steps through the breach and continues his descent, leaving the stunned arbitrators alone in the abattoir he created. Vex lowers his shotgun, his hands trembling slightly. He had just witnessed the complete and utter annihilation of a major chaos uprising in less time than it takes to recite a litany of hate. And it was all the work of one man, or whatever he was. The massacre in the spire was over, but the hunt had only just begun. What an absolutely brutal chapter. The imagery of the Doomslayer as this unstoppable force, viewed through the terrified eyes of both allies and enemies, is just fantastic. It perfectly captures his essence while grounding it in the familiar horror of the 40K universe. What do you guys think? Is he a blessing from the Emperor? A rogue weapon from the dark age of technology? Or something else entirely? Let me know your theories down in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive. If you enjoyed this journey into the lore, please consider hitting that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter of this incredible story. Your support means the world to me and helps the channel grow. Solemn, ominous music begins, then fades slightly to allow narration to be heard clearly. The void black expanse parted for the inquisitorial vessel, a blade of righteous fury cutting through the darkness toward its troubled destination. On the bridge of the righteous sanction a lone figure stood silhouetted against the swirling blues and purples of the image. His face, a mask of grim determination etched with the scars of 100 battles. was illuminated by the cold, holographic light of a Pictus. This was Inquisitor Ezekiel Malric of the Ordo Malleus, a man for whom the phrase acceptable losses was not a calculation, but a creed. His gaze was fixed on the planet, filling the viewscreen Moire Secundus, a world now draped in a shroud of silence and death. Slight pause. The sound of a crackling Vox transmission can be heard faintly. Report. Malric's voice was a low growl, like stones grinding together. It carried the weight of centuries of thankless duty, a sound that brooked no argument and tolerated no failure. A servitor, its flesh and augmetics worry softly, replied in a monotone drone. Lord Inquisitor, we have entered high orbit. Local astropathic communication remains silent. Planetary defense grid is non-responsive. Scans indicate widespread devastation, concentrated around the primary hive city. Malric didn't turn. His eyes remained locked on the wounded world below. Send down the primary reconnaissance drone. I want eyes on the ground. And prepare the lander. We make planetfall in 1 hour. He had seen this before. The eerie silence, the sudden severing of communication, was the classic signature of a demonic incursion. Another world tainted, another population damned. It was a familiar, sickening song, and he knew all the verses. But this time, something felt different. The preliminary reports, fragmented and panicked as they were, spoke of something else. Something that fought the darkness with a ferocity that bordered on the profane. Shift in tone, more analytical and focused, the lander descended through an atmosphere thick with ash and the metallic temps of blood. It touched down in the heart of what was once a bustling plaza, now a charnel house. The scale of the slaughter was breathtaking. Bodies of planetary defense force troopers and terrified citizens were strewn across the ferrocrete, their final moments of terror frozen on their faces. But among them were other corpses, things that should not exist in real space, the twisted, nightmarish forms of demons, their ichor-slicked bodies torn apart with a savage, almost personal, violence. Malric stepped out onto the blood-stained ground, his power armor hissing as it pressurized. The air was cold, heavy with the psychic residue of unimaginable carnage. He walked through the macabre gallery, his stormbolter held at a low ready. His retinue followed a few paces behind, a hand-picked collection of instruments for his holy work. There was Alara, the Psyche, her eyes shut tight as she fought to shield her mind from the screaming echoes in the warp. Magos Explorator Vex, a tech priest of Mars, his mechadendrites twitching as they scanned the environment, collecting data with cold, machine-like efficiency. And finally, silently padding behind them all, was Silhouette, the death cult assassin, her twin power blades humming softly, her gaze sweeping every shadow for a threat. Magos, Malric commanded, stopping before a mangled pile of demonic flesh. Recovered pic, display them now. A beam of light shot from Vex's optical array, projecting a flickering, chaotic scene onto the wall of a blasted hablock. The footage was from a trooper's helmet cam, shaky and filled with static. It showed a desperate last stand. Guardsmen firing their lasguns ineffectually into a tide of laughing, capering horrors. Then, a new figure entered the frame. Clad in green armor that was both alien and yet strangely archaic, it moved with an impossible speed and brutality. It was a whirlwind of destruction, a force of nature given form. The being didn't use psychic powers, nor did it chant litanies. It simply killed. It tore a bloodletter in half with its bare hands. It crushed a plague-bearer's head under its armored boot. It moved through the demonic horde, not as a soldier fighting a war, but as a predator culling a herd. Malric watched, his expression unreadable. The entity on the screen. It showed no fear, no hesitation, but more importantly, it showed a complete and utter disregard for the warp. The demons recoiled from it, not just from its physical strength, but from something more fundamental. It was anathema to them, a walking, breathing paradox. It killed the creatures of the Imperium, yet it radiated no faith, no psychic might of the kind the Imperium recognized. It was a void, a null space, in the spiritual fabric of the universe. The footage ended abruptly as the trooper's head was torn from his shoulders by a stray claw. The projection vanished, plunging the plaza back into the gloomy twilight. Silence reigned for a long moment, broken only by the distant, mournful wind. "Magos Vex, your analysis," Malric said, his voice quiet but sharp. "Subject's armor composition is unknown, but registers extreme durability. The techpris in energy signatures from its weaponry are unconventional, potent, but the most significant data, Lord Inquisitor, is the absence of data. It has no discernible psychic signature. It is not blessed by the Emperor, nor is it touched by the ruinous powers. It's simply..." Malric nodded slowly. The ancient axiom of the Ordo Malleus echoed in his mind. If it kills demons, it must be studied. He turned to face his retinue, his eyes burning with a cold fire. "This being, it is an anomaly, a weapon that we do not understand. And anything we do not understand is a potential threat to the Imperium." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle upon them. "But it is also a potential asset of unparalleled value. Ilara, you will track its psychic echo or the lack thereof. Magas, you will analyze its technology, its methods. Silhouette, you will be our scalpel, should one be required." His gaze swept across their faces, demanding and receiving their unspoken assent. "Our mission has changed. We are no longer here to merely purge the demonic. We are here to hunt. Find this entity. I want it alive. We must understand it." He looked back at the carnage, at the impossible scene of a lone warrior defying the very nature of chaos. A new, dangerous thought began to form in his mind. If it resists study, he whispered to himself, completing the axiom, it must be destroyed. The hunt for the Doomslayer had begun. In the deepest, darkest bowels of the hive world, a new legend was being forged. Not in scripture or song, but in blood, fire, and fury. They called him the Butcher of the a name whispered first in fear, then in awe, and finally, in sheer, mind-numbing terror. He moved without words, without mercy, and seemingly without rest. A force of nature, an engine of pure, unadulterated vengeance. The Doomslayer's hunt had begun. With Enoors, his arrival had rewritten the very laws of the Underhive, gangs that had held territory for generations, whose names were synonymous with violence and brutality, scattered like rats before a cleansing flame. Entire sectors, once teeming with scum and villainy, fell silent, abandoned. The gangers didn't just run, they fled, their bravado shattered, their stories choked with the impossible sight of what they had witnessed. They spoke of a green-armored giant, a silent destroyer who moved faster than the eye could follow, whose every action was an act of annihilation. Chaos rituals, those blasphemous ceremonies that sought to tear open the fabric of reality, collapsed mid. The cultists, their faces painted with the symbols of their dark gods, found their prayers answered not by demons, but by a shotgun blast that turned their profane altars into splinters and gore. The air, thick with incense, and the promise of forbidden power, was suddenly scoured clean by the ozone scent of plasma and the metallic temps of vaporized blood. The warp shrieked and recoiled, not from the faith of the Imperial creed, but from the raw, focused hatred of a single man. Inquisitor Vex, ever the pragmatist, followed the trail of devastation. It wasn't hard to find. The path was a scar carved through the hive's rotting heart. Walls of plasteel and rockreet, structures that had stood for centuries, were simply gone, crushed inward as if struck by a meteor. The air hummed with residual energy, and the ground was stained not with pools of blood, but wheat, dark, scorched patterns where it had been instantly boiled away by unimaginable heat. It was a level of destruction that defied conventional weapons, a ferocity that bordered on the supernatural. Vex moved through the silent corridors, her auspex chattering uselessly, overwhelmed by the sheer energy readings. Here, an entire cult cell had been erased, not just killed, but obliterated. The remnants of their blasphemous icons were fused into the walls. The very shadows seemed to have been burned away. There were no bodies left to count, no survivors to interrogate. There was only the chilling, absolute finality of the Slayer's work. This wasn't random violence. Vex could see that now. Every shattered barricade, every obliterated heretic, every silenced ritual. It was all connected. This was a hunt, a methodical, relentless pursuit. It was as if the Slayer could smell the taint of chaos, drawn to it like a shark to blood in the water. Each kill wasn't just an act of violence. It was a statement. It was vengeance etched into motion. A single, burning purpose made manifest in a storm of destruction. The Slayer wasn't just clearing a path. He was surgically excising a cancer, and his tools were rage and firepower. As Vex stood in the epicenter of one such massacre, a thought, cold and sharp, pierced through her inquisitorial training. She had seen the reports, read the fragmented data codices from that strange, red world. The symbols matched. The sheer, unholy violence matched. This wasn't some new strain of Ogrin or a lost space marine. This was something else entirely, an entity from beyond the known stars. A being whose entire existence was dedicated to a war she was only just beginning to comprehend. A war against the very same forces she had sworn to fight. The cults, for their part, were in a state of panic. Their leaders, who had promised them power and glory, were now turning on each other, desperate to find a way to stop the green phantom that haunted their territory. They tried everything. Ambushes with heavy stubbers and autoguns were met with a blur of motion and the sound of tearing metal. Traps, laden with explosives, detonated harmlessly against his armor or were simply bypassed. They even tried summoning their demonic patrons, hoping the entities of the warp would deal with this intruder. It was a fatal mistake. For the Slayer, the appearance of a demon wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. Vex found the aftermath of one such summoning circle. The air was still thick with the stench of brimstone and otherworldly energies. But at its center was not a triumphant demon, but the sundered, dissipating remains of one. The runes were scorched, the summoning focus shattered. The cultists who had performed the ritual were little more than charred outlines on the floor. He hadn't just banished the demon, he had executed it. He had dragged it, screaming from the warp, and torn it apart with his bare hands. This was the moment Vex understood. The Doomslayer wasn't just a butcher. He was a predator, and the Underhive was his hunting ground. The hive gangs, the cultists, the demons themselves, they were all his prey. He wasn't fighting for the Imperium. He wasn't fighting for glory or territory. He was fighting a personal, eternal war. A war where the only acceptable outcome was the complete and utter annihilation of his enemy. And as she looked out over the sprawling, lightless expanse of the Underhive, Vex felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was a chilling sense of alignment. The Imperium had spent 10,000 years fighting the great enemy, paying a price in blood and faith that was beyond measure. And now, a force had arrived that fought that same enemy with a hatred so pure, so absolute, it made the faith of the most zealous fanatic seem lukewarm. The butcher of the Underhive was a monster, an engine of untold destruction. But in a galaxy teeming with horrors, where humanity stood on the brink of extinction, Vex couldn't help but wonder. Was he the monster they needed? The legend of the Doomslayer was no longer a whisper. It was a roar that echoed through the depths, a promise of carnage that sent the forces of chaos reeling. The hunt continued, and the true meaning of damnation was about to be taught to the denizens of the dark. Thank you so much for watching. This chapter was an absolute blast to narrate, and the story's only going to get more intense from here. If you enjoyed this dive into the grim darkness of the far future, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Video opens on a panoramic view of a grim, industrial manufactorum within a hive city. The air is thick with smog, and the distant sounds of machinery create a constant oppressy. The scene is dark, lit only by emergency strobes and the glow of molten metal in distant forges. In the shadowed heart of the hive, where iron groans and steam hisses like a nest of serpents, a new kind of silence is about to fall. This is the manufactorum Omega Savan, a place of endless labor and sweat. But tonight, its purpose has been twisted. The air, usually tasting of oil and ozone, now carries the acrid tang of incense and the metallic scent of impending slaughter. Through the labyrinthine corridors of rusted steel and humming conduits, they came. Their ceramite armor, once the proud crimson of the 17th Legion, is now defiled with blasphemous runes and idolatrous script. The word-bearers, heralds of the primordial truth, apostles of damnation. They march not to the beat of a war drum, but to the rhythm of a hateful litany. Their voices a discordant choir, chanting praises to the ruinous powers. They are here for him. They have felt the tear and reality, the ripple of unnatural silence that precedes his arrival. They believe him to be a demon, a rival entity to be bound or destroyed. They're tragically, catastrophically mistaken. He stands at the nexus of the main assembly line, a lone figure against the backdrop of colossal, dormant machinery. The Doomslayer, clad in emerald armor that seems to absorb the very light around it. He is an icon of pure, unadulterated rage. He doesn't speak. He doesn't posture. He simply waits. His praetor suit hums with a quiet, letal energy, a stark contrast to the cacophony of his approaching foes. The Dark Apostle, a zealot named Vorlag, the Despoiler, steps forward. His voice, amplified by a vox grill shaped like a screaming maw, booms through the chamber. Behold, the anomaly, a creature of the warp, lost and blind. Bow before the will of Lorgar, and you may yet find purpose in servitude. The word-bearers raise their bolters, the barrels glowing with malevolent intent. Their chanting intensifies, a wave of psychic and spiritual corruption meant to break the minds of lesser beings. For the dark gods, for the primordial truth, the Doomslayer's response is not a word, but an action. The plasma rifle in his hands winds to life, its coils glowing with the heat of a captive sun. A sphere of incandescent blue energy shrieks across the manufactorum floor. It doesn't just hit the first Chaos Marine. It engulfs him. The ceramite, blessed with unholy wards, vaporizes. Instantly, the Astartes within is reduced to superheated vapor and a lingering scream that is cut short. The chanting falters. For a heartbeat, there is only the echo of that single, devastating shot. Then, fury replaces shock. Heretic. Vorlag roars, "Destroy! Eat!" Offer its steel shell to the forge and its soul to the pantheon. The manufactorum erupts into a storm of bolt shells. Explosive rounds detonate against the Slayer's armor, sending showers of sparks into the air but failing to find purchase. He moves with a speed that defies his size and the weight of his armor, a green blur weaving through the incoming fire. He switches to the super shotgun. The iconic double-barreled weapon roars, and a word-bearer charging him is thrown backward, his chest cavity turned into a gaping chasm of shredded armor and flesh. The Slayer doesn't pause. He slams the weapon open, feeds it to fresh shells, and snaps it shut with a single, fluid motion that is as much a part of the kill as the shot itself. The meat hook launches, embedding itself in another Marine, and he rockets forward, a human cannonball of vengeance. He lands amidst them, and the true symphony of destruction begins. A right hook shatters a helmet, visor and all. An armored elbow crushes a gorget, silencing a warrior's prayer forever. He rips a chainsword from a stumbling Astartes and uses it against its former owner, the weapon's teeth chewing through corrupted plate with brutal irony. The word-bearers are Astartes, the angels of death. They are superhuman, transhuman warriors who have waged war across the galaxy for 10,000 years. They have faced demons, Xenos horrors, and the armies of the Imperium. They do not know fear. But this is different. This is not a battle. This is an extermination. The Slayer moves with a singular, terrifying purpose. He is not fighting for territory, for glory, or for faith. He is an engine of pure, righteous anger, a force of nature that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped, and cannot be corrupted. Their profane blessings, their dark pacts, mean nothing to him. A Marine with a heavy bolter lays down a stream of suppressive fire. The Slayer raises the chain gun, its multiple barrels spinning into a blur. A torrent of lead, far faster and more devastating than the Astartes' own, meets the incoming fire. The heavy bolter marine is shredded, his weapon torn from his grasp as his body is riddled with hundreds of high-caliber rounds. Vorlag watches, his faith warring with the impossible reality before him. His champions, warriors who have walked the surface of demon worlds, are being dismantled like faulty servitors. The industrial chamber is becoming a charnel house. The floor is slick with boiling blood and coolant, littered with the shattered icons and broken armor of his legion. The air smells of burnt metal, cooked flesh, and ozone. Impossible. The dark apostle bellows, hefting his accursed Crozius. The demon-faced weapon crackles with warp energy. You are but one man. I am the voice of the gods. He charges, his own power field shimmering around him. The Doomslayer turns his attention to the leader. He drops the now empty Chingan and draws the crucible. The blade of pure argent energy extends with a hum that cuts through the din, a searing red light in the gloom. It is the antithesis of the warp-fueled weapon. Wildweld wields. Their weapons clash. A shockwave of energy, one holy and one profane, ripples outwards, shattering nearby viewports and buckling steel plates. The Dark Apostle is strong, empowered by the very essence of chaos. He pushes the Slayer back a step, his Crozius spitting black lightning. Your soul will be my offering. Vorlag screams, his face contorted in a mask of fanatical rage. For the first time, a sound emanates from the Slayer's helmet. It's not a word, it's a low growl, the sound of a predator about to end a fight. With a surge of impossible strength, he shoves Vorlag back. The crucible blade swings in a blindingly fast arc. It slices through the haft of the accursed Crozius as if it were made of paper. Vorlag stares in disbelief at his broken staff of office. Before he can react, the Slayer's gaunted fist smashes into his face. The impact is titanic. The Apostle's helmet cracks, then shatters, revealing a face pale with shock and sudden, dawning terror. The Slayer grabs him by the throat, lifting the powerful Chaos Lord off his feet with one hand. Vorlag claws at the unyielding gauntlet, his superhuman strength failing him. He looks into the dark visor of the Slayer, and for the first time in millennia, he understands true fear. He is not looking at a demon or a rival. He is looking at an ending. An absolute, final judgment. With a final, brutal twist, it's over. The last litany of the word-bearers is silenced. The Doomslayer stands alone in the furnace he has created. The manufactorum is quiet now, save for the drip of blood and the crackle of dying fires. He retracts the crucible blade, his crimson light fading. He turns and walks away, leaving a tableau of absolute devastation behind him. He does not look back. He does not need to. The silence is his victory speech. In the grim darkness of the far future, where faith meets fury, he is the one who survives. The air in the manufactorum hung thick and heavy, a toxic cocktail of ozone, industrial lubricants, and the ever-present stench of desperation that defined the lower levels of the hive city. Towering, skeletal gantries crisscrossed the cavernous space, their metal limbs draped in rusted chains that swayed like condemned souls in a forgotten hell. Pistons, the size of hablocks, hammered down with rhythmic, earth-shaking force. Their deafening impacts, punctuated by the hiss of superheated steam and the grinding protest of ancient machinery. This was the industrial heart. A place where progress was measured in megatons and human life was just another expendable resource. It was a fitting arena for what was to come. Through the haze and the cacophony, a lone figure moved with an unnatural, predatory grace. He was a being of green and gray, his pretersuit a testament to some forgotten, brutalist art form. Every line of the armor was designed for war, every plate scarred with the tales of 1,000 battles across 1,000 worlds. He was the Doomslayer, and he walked through this industrial nightmare as if he owned it. His movements were economical, his head sweeping from side to side, the visor of his helmet a cold, impassive void. He was a force of nature given form, a storm of silent retribution searching for a target. He didn't have to search for long. From the shadowed archways and elevated platforms, they emerged, Their armor was a perversion of the noble ceramite it once was, colored a deep, traitorous crimson and defaced with blasphemous sigils that seemed to writhe in the flickering emergency lights. Parchment strips, inscribed with vile promises and heretical scripture, flapped from their palms. These were the word-bearers, the sons of Lorgar, apostles of the dark gods. They were fanatics, zealots who had traded their souls for power and their honor for damnation. A chorus of guttural chants rose to meet the industrial din, a litany of praise for the ruinous powers, for the dark gods, for the primordial truth. One of them bellowed, his voice distorted into a metallic snarl by his helmet's vox grill. His bolter, a grotesque fusion of weapon and demonic flesh, leveled at the Slayer. The false Emperor's lackey will burn. The Slayer didn't answer. Words were a currency he did not trade in. His response was a sphere of incandescent blue-white energy, a projectile of pure, weaponized starfire that screamed from the barrel of his plasma rifle. It crossed the distance in a heartbeat, impacting the chanting Chaos Marine square in the chest. The heretical scripture on his armor vaporized instantly. The crimson ceramite buckled, melted, and then exploded in a shower of molten slag and superheated blood. The word-bearer's devotional chant was cut short, replaced by a wet, gurgling shriek that was mercifully brief. The air, already thick, became choked with the smell of cooked flesh and flash-boiled gore. The remaining word-bearers, momentarily stunned, not by the death of their brother, but by the sheer contemptuous efficiency of it, roared in collective fury. Their discipline, forged in the crucible of the Horus heresy, reasserted itself. They weren't just a mob, they were a legion. They spread out, using the towering machinery as cover, their bolter fire converging on the Slayer's position. Explosive shells detonated against the Slayer's praetor suit, the impacts sounding like colossal hammers striking an anvil. Each shell, designed to tear a normal human limb from limb, barely scratched the alien alloy of his armor. He weathered the storm, his stance immovable, a fortress against their holy fury. He was not just a warrior. He was an event, a cataclysm that had come for them. With a surge of inhuman speed, he dashed forward, closing the distance to a word-bearer who was reloading behind a stack of promethium barrels. The Chaos Marine looked up, his helmet lenses widening in what could only be panic. He was a veteran of the Long War, a being who had witnessed the birth of galaxies in the Eye of Terror. Yet the sight of the silent green figure bearing down on him filled him with a primal instinctual dread. He raised his bolt pistol, a desperate, futile gesture. The Slayer's arm shot out, his gaunted hand clamping around the Marine's helmet. There was a sickening crunch of ceramite and bone as he squeezed. He lifted the sputtering traitor from his feet, the word-bearer's armored boots kicking uselessly in the air. Without a shred of ceremony, the Slayer slammed him headfirst into the promethium barrels. The impact ruptured the containers, and the volatile fuel gushed out, pooling around their feet. Another word-bearer, this one wielding a roaring chain sword, charged from the flank. "Die, anathema," he screamed, the weapon's monomolecular teeth chewing through the air. The Slayer, still holding the first Marine, turned to face the new threat. He used his captive as a shield. The chainsword bit deep into the back of the first word-bearer, tearing through armor and spine with a wet, grinding shriek. Before the swordsman could react, the Slayer tossed the mangled body aside and fired his plasma rifle again, this time at the fuel-soaked ground. The manufactorum floor erupted in a colossal fireball. The chainsword-wielding Marine was consumed instantly, his final scream lost in the roar of the inferno. The heat was immense, a wave of incineration that buckled steel gantries and melted ferrocrete. The Slayer walked out of the heart of the flames, his armor glowing cherry red, but otherwise unharmed. He was an avatar of destruction, untouched by the very element he so liberally employed. The remaining word-bearers stared, their fanatical belief momentarily shaken by the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. This was not a soldier. This was not a champion of the Corpse Emperor. This was something else entirely, something older and far, far angrier. One of them, perhaps a champion or an aspiring champion, distinguished by the ornate horns sweeping from his helmet, regained his composure. He is but one man. Overwhelm him. The dark gods demand his soul. He hefted a heavy bolter, its massive ammunition belt clanking against the floor, and opened fire. The barrage was relentless, a stream of mass-reactive death that kicked up sparks and shards of metal from the Slayer's armor. The Slayer responded by activating the weapon mounted on his shoulder. With a mechanical whir, a pod of micro-missiles launched, each one trailing a wisp of smoke as it corkscrewed through the air. They slammed into the champion and the two Marines flanking him. The explosions were surgical, precise, blowing limbs from torsos and turning corrupted armor into jagged shrapnel. The heavy bolter spun through the air, clattering to the ground amidst a rain of blood and viscera. Now, only a handful remained. Their faith, once an impenetrable shield, was cracking. They had faced the holy warriors of the Imperium, the strange and terrible Xenos races, and the demonic legions of their rivals. They had never faced anything like this. This was not a battle. It was an extermination. The Slayer swapped his plasma rifle for the super shotgun, the double-barreled weapon a thing of brutal simplicity. He moved with a terrifying rhythm, a dance of death set to the beat of reloading and firing. He hooked onto a high gantry with the meat hook, launching himself into the air, a green comet arcing through the industrial gloom. He landed amidst two of them, the impact shaking the walkway. Before they could even turn, he fired both barrels. The first shot, at point-blank range, turned one word-bearer's torso into a red mist. The second tore the head and shoulders off the other. The last word-bearer stood frozen, his bolter held loosely at his side. He watched as the Slayer reloaded, the practiced motion swift and merciless. He saw the bodies of his brothers, broken and burned, littering the factory floor. He saw the furnace of their own making, a testament to their failure. In that moment, the faith that had sustained him for 10,000 years of war evaporated, replaced by a single, all-consuming emotion: terror. He dropped his weapon. The clatter of the bolter on the metal floor was shockingly loud in the sudden quiet. He raised his hands, a gesture of surrender he had not made in millennia. The Doomslayer paused, the shotgun held ready, his head tilted slightly, as if considering the gesture. For a single, fleeting moment, a spark of hope might have ignited in the traitor's heart. Perhaps this being understood mercy, perhaps it could be reasoned with. The hope was extinguished as quickly as it arose. The Slayer took a deliberate step forward. Then another. He raised the shotgun. There was no hatred in the gesture, no fury, just an implacable, mechanical finality. He was not a judge, nor was he an executioner. He was simply the end. The manufactorum fell silent. The only sounds the dying crackle of flames and the ceaseless, indifferent rhythm of the hive's machinery. The Slayer stood for a moment amidst the carnage. Alone, silent victor in a cathedral of his own making. The air was thick with boiling blood and the ozone temps of plasma discharge. The word-bearers had met him with faith and fury. He had answered with silence and slaughter. When their battle was done, only one survived. His work here was finished. Without a backward glance, the Doomslayer moved on, disappearing back into the industrial haze, seeking his next battle, his eternal war continuing ever onward. Thank you so much for joining me for this tale from the grim darkness of the far future. Have you ever wondered what goes on inside that helmet? What drives the Doomslayer, the one-man army against the legions of hell? It's not just anger. It's not just revenge. It's something deeper, something colder. It's the mind of a being forged in the crucible of eternal war. A mind that looks at hell and sees not a realm of terror, but a problem to be solved, a stain to be erased. Today, we're diving into the mind of the Slayer, exploring the relentless purpose that fuels his unending crusade. Forget fear. Forget doubt. In the Slayer's world, there is only momentum. He dreams of hell and of breaking it. This isn't a nightmare for him. It's a mission statement. When the Slayer closes his eyes, he doesn't see rest. He sees flashes of memory, a mosaic of damnation he has personally dismantled. He sees the burning embers of Argent Denor, a home lost. He sees the towering, blasphemous form of the icon of sin, a monument to a hubris he shattered. AC's Earth, our Earth, choked by demonic smog and wreathed in flames. A tragedy he arrived too late to prevent, but is sworn to avenge. These aren't traumatic flashbacks that haunt him. They are reminders. They are full. Each memory is a log on the fire of his cold, white-hot rage. Every demon he encounters, from the lowly imp to the tyrannical baron of hell, is a familiar face in a crowd he intends to disperse permanently. There's no surprise, no shock. It's like a farmer seeing weeds in his field. He knows what they are, and he knows what he must do. Pull them out, root and stem. Think about the sheer force of will required. Most mortals, even the greatest heroes, would be driven mad by the sights and sounds of hell. The constant whispers, the impossible geometry, the air thick with disparates. A psychic assault designed to break the spirit. But the Slayer's mind is a fortress. It's a bastion of singular focus. The whispers of demons are just static to him, background noise to the symphony of destruction he conducts with his shotgun and chain gun. Where a normal person sees a terrifying shrine dripping with gore and echoing with tormented souls, the Slayer sees just another hellish structure. Another target, another piece of their reality that he must methodically tear down until nothing is left. He is not just fighting demons. He is fighting the very concept of hell. He is at war with an entire dimension, and in his mind, he's winning. This unyielding nature is what makes him so terrifying to his enemies. The demons have a concept of fear. They understand pain. They can be broken. But the Slayer, he is an absolute. He is a force of nature, like a hurricane or an earthquake. You can't reason with him. You can't intimidate him. You can only be in his way. And that is a very, very bad place to be. His mind is an engine of pure, unadulterated purpose. Every step is forward. Every bullet fired is a sentence. Every glory kill is a statement. He doesn't stop to question his actions. He doesn't suffer from moral ambiguity. The equation in his head is simple. If it's a demon, it dies. If it's a part of hell, it gets destroyed. There is no room for anything else. Now, let's draw a parallel to another universe. Imagine the Slayer encountering a great unclean one, a massive avatar of plague and decay. A space marine might be repulsed, their faith tested. The Slayer would just rev his chainsaw. A lord of change, a master of manipulation and deceit, would try to play mind games, to twist his perceptions. It would be like trying to manipulate a speeding bullet. The Slayer's mind has no cracks for such psychic trickery to find purchase. He would simply see a big, feathered demon and start blasting. The chaos gods themselves feed on emotion. Khorne on wrath, Nurgle on despair, Slanesh on excess, Tzeentch on ambition. The Slayer's rage is different. It's not the hot-blooded, screaming rage that Khorne craves. It's a cold, silent, focused fury. It's the rage of a glacier, slow but unstoppable, grinding everything in its path to dust. It's a rage so pure it wouldn't feed Khorne. It would starve him. He feels no despair, only determination. He indulges in no excess, only efficiency. His only ambition is to kill demons. In a way, the Slayer's very being is anathema to the powers of the warp. He is a psychic black hole, consuming their influence without giving them anything in return. Even the Imperium of man might not know what to do with him. They might declare him a holy warrior, a living saint of wrath, or they might declare him an unsanctioned, uncontrollable force and try to stop him. We all know how that would end. The Grey Knights, the ultimate demon hunters of the Imperium, spend their lives training to resist the horrors of the warp. The Slayer simply is the resistance. He doesn't need faith in an emperor to protect him. His will is his shield, and his arsenal is his prayer. His mind is a testament to the idea that one being, with enough will and enough ammunition, can stand against a literal hell. It's not about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about being the most resolute. It's about having a singular, unwavering goal and dedicating every fiber of your existence to achieving it. When the Slayer reloads his super shotgun, it's not just a tactical action. It's a moment of punctuation in his internal monologue, a period at the end of one demon's sentence and the start of a new one for the next. The clack-clack of the shells is the only language he needs. His world is stripped of all complexity, all distraction. There is only the mission. There is only the rip and tear. He's not just a man. He is a concept. He is the personification of mankind's will to survive, distilled into its most potent and violent form. He is the immune system of reality, and hell is the disease. This is what it's like inside the mind of the Slayer. A quiet, cold, and infinitely determined space, filled with the echoes of past victories and the blueprint for countless more to come. A universe of rage, focused into a single point, aimed directly at the heart of hell. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the psyche of the legendary Doomslayer. If you enjoyed this exploration of lore, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content like this. They tried to summon a god. He arrived instead. These chilling words were found inscribed on a data slay, clutched in the skeletal hand of a cult deep within the catacombs of a forgotten shrine world. This is the story of the Black Spire, a tale that blurs the lines between imperial record and hushed legend, a story that involves heresy, demonic power, and an entity of pure, unadulterated rage that answered a call meant for another. Our story begins with Inquisitor Malric of the Order Malleus, a man whose soul was as scarred and weathered as his power armor. 4 months, Malric and his retinue had been hunting a Khornate, cult known as the Bloodied Moor. Their trail of ritualistic slaughter had led them across systems, always one step behind, discovering only the gruesome aftermath of their bloody work. But on the desolate moon of Griffith's 4, they finally got ahead. They discovered the Black Spire, a needle of obsidian rock that pierced the rust-colored sky, pulsing with an unnatural, malevolent energy. It was a place steeped in the warp, a place where reality itself felt thin and brittle. Malric's astropaths screamed of a psychic wound being torn in the fabric of the universe, a wound centered directly on the spire. They knew they were close, descending into the spire's depths. Inquisitor's team navigated corridors slick with gore and adorned with the brutal iconography of the blood god. The air grew thick, with the coppery tang of blood and the low, guttural chanting that echoed from the heart of the structure. They were walking into the epicenter of a massive ritual, one on a scale Malric had rarely witnessed. This was no mere summoning of lesser demons. This was an attempt to call forth a true Prince of Chaos, a greater demon of Khorne. In the central chamber, a vast cavern lit by rivers of molten brass and pyres of burning skulls, the scene was one of utter depravity. Hundreds of cultists, their bodies marked with sigils of Khorne, chanted in a trance-like frenzy. At the center stood the High Priest, a behemoth of a man clad in gore-splattered armor, his voice booming as he recited the final verses of a profane rite. The swirling vortex of red and black energy was coalescing above him, a raw portal to the warp. Reality buckled and tore, and through the nascent rift, the Inquisitor Psychers could feel the immeasurable hatred of the entity being summoned. It was a consciousness of pure, unending battle lust, a thirst for skulls that had existed for millennia. The bloodthirster was coming. Malric and his team prepared for a desperate, likely final stand. They were hopelessly outnumbered, and facing a greater demon was a suicide mission. But their duty was clear: stop the ritual at any cost. As they raised their weapons, ready to charge into the jaws of hell, something impossible happened. The portal, which had been a swirling vortex of Khornate energy, suddenly flickered. The crimson hue was violently pierced by streaks of an angry, argent green. The guttural roar of the approaching demon was cut short, replaced by a sound that silenced the entire chamber. It was a sound of grinding gears, of industrial fury, and of heavy, rhythmic, heavy metal music. Before anyone could comprehend this shift, the portal didn't just flicker. It exploded outwards. But it wasn't the bloodthirster that emerged. A figure, clad in predagreen armor that seemed to hum with its own power, was launched from the rift like a cannonball. He landed with a ground-shaking impact that cracked the obsidian floor, scattering cultists like bowling pins. He stood up, a veritable mountain of muscle and ceramite. In one hand, he held a double-barreled shotgun of obscene proportions. On his back, a strange shoulder-mounted cannon swiveled, seeking targets. His helmet, an icon of grim determination, scanned the room. The cultists stared in stunned silence. The high priest faltered in his chant. Even Malric and his veteran stormtroopers lowered their weapons, dumbfounded. This was no servant of the Imperium. This was no demon they recognized. This was something else entirely. The high priest, recovering his composure, bellowed, "Who dares interfere with the rights of Khorne? You will offer your skull to the skull throne." He pointed a clawed hand at the stranger, and a pack of monstrous, canine-like warp spawn, fleshhounds of Khorne, bounded forward, their maws dripping with ethereal fire. The stranger didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply raised his shotgun. The chamber erupted in a symphony of violence that was somehow different from the cultist brutal worship. This wasn't ritualistic. It was methodical. It was efficient. It was extermination. The first fleshhound was turned into a red mist. The second had its head obliterated. The third was bisected by a sweeping arc of the stranger's arm-mounted blade, which pulsed with a faint, fiery glow. The stranger was a whirlwind of destruction. He moved with a speed and ferocity that defied his bulk. He swapped weapons with practiced ease, his movements a blur of mechanical precision. A rocket from his shoulder cannon vaporized a cluster of cultists. A blast from a plasma rifle melted another group into slag. He tore through the warp spawn and the cultists, not with the wild abandon of a cornate berserker, but with the focused, cold fury of a machine built for one purpose: to kill demons. Malric watched, his tactical mind reeling. The stranger fought with a kind of righteous anger that was terrifyingly familiar, yet alien. It was the fury of a holy warrior, but not one Malric had ever read about in the Imperial Creed. He seemed to feed on the violence, growing stronger, faster with every kill. Ammunition and health seemed to appear from the very essence of his fallen foes, a profane logic that shouldn't be possible. The high priest screamed in rage and frustration. His ritual was collapsing. The portal was unstable, flickering between Khorne's realm and this other, stranger hellscape of green energy. He had called for a god of slaughter, and instead, this force of nature had answered. He roared, channeling the raw power of the warp into his own form, his muscles swelling, his skin turning a brassy red. He charged the stranger, a massive Chinex Eeld Heeg. The two forces of rage collided. The high priest's axe, an artifact that had claimed thousands of lives, swung down. The stranger met the blow not with his weapons, but with his bare hands. He caught the axe, mid-swing, the impact sending shockwaves through the chamber. With a guttural roar that was pure, undiluted human rage, he wrenched the weapon from the priest's grasp and snapped it over his knee. The high priest stared in disbelief before the stranger's fist, crackling with energy, slammed into his face. He staggered back, and in that moment of weakness, the stranger acted. His arm blade, the crucible, ignited with fiery runes, extending into a long, burning sword of pure energy. The high priest had only a moment to register the incandescent glow before the stranger lunged. With a final decisive thrust, the Doomslayer impaled the Khorne priest directly through the chest. The crucible blade pulsed, and a wave of searing energy erupted from the point of impact, shattering the priest's body and soul. The ritual chant died with a final, choked gasp. The moment the priest fell, the portal collapsed. The raw warp energy dissipated, the red light vanishing, leaving only the dim, hellish glow of the spire's fires. The remaining cultists, their connection to their dark masters severed, broke and fled in terror. The stranger paid them no mind. His target was eliminated. His work here was done. He turned slowly, his helmeted gaze falling upon Malric and his team. For a tense moment, the two groups stood facing each other. The Inquisitor, a man who had faced down lords of chaos and monsters from the darkest corners of the galaxy, felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. uncertainty. This being was not of the Imperium, nor of chaos. He was a third, unknown variable, an anomaly of pure, destructive force. The stranger gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a sign of peace, but of acknowledgement. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back towards the spot where the portal had been. As he walked, a new rift, one of shimmering green energy, tore open in reality before him. He stepped through it without hesitation, and the portal snapped shut behind him, leaving the chamber in an eerie silence, broken only by the crackling of fires and the groans of the dying. Inquisitor Malric and his stormtroopers stood alone amidst the carnage. They had survived. The ritual was stopped. The greater demon was denied. But 1,000 new questions burned in the Inquisitor's mind. Who was that warrior? Where did he come from? And, most importantly, as he looked at the sheer, absolute destruction wrought in the chamber, he wondered, was he a savior, or was he simply a different kind of doom? The data slate he would later recover gave him the only name he would ever have for this entity, the Doomslayer. And the galaxy, already teeming with horrors, had just become infinitely more complicated. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into a legendary crossover. What do you think would happen next? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe for more content from the grim darkness of the far future, and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. Welcome back, lore masters and franchise crossovers enthusiasts, to another deep dive into the what-ifs of the 41st millennium. Today, we're tackling a clash of titans, a confrontation that would make even a demon Primarch pause. We're exploring the moment a sanctioned psyker of the Imperium, under the command of Inquisitor Malric, attempts the unthinkable, to peer into the mind of the Doomslayer. Grab your bolt pistols and predator suits, because things are about to get messy. Imagine the scene. A dimly lit chamber aboard an inquisitorial black ship. The air crackles with latent psychic energy. In the center of the room, restrained by adamantium chains that would hold a Khorne berserker, is Doomslayer. He's silent, a statue of pure, unadulterated rage, his helmet obscuring any expression. Across from him stands Malric, an inquisitor of the Ordo Malleus, his face a mask of grim determination. He's seen demons, heretics, and Xenos horrors, but this being is something else entirely. It radiates an aura not of chaos, but of something far older, far more focused. Beside the Inquisitor's his most trusted asset, a Primaris psyker named Lyra. She's a veteran of 100 psychic duels, her mind a fortress honed by the Scholastica. She's faced down greater demons in the warp, stared into the abyss and forced it to blink. Malric gives the nod. This is it, the moment of truth. He needs to know what this silent green warrior is, where it came from, and what drives it. Is it a weapon, a new form of abomination, or something worse? Lyra closes her eyes. Her breathing slows. The witchlight begins to glow around her, her hands trembling slightly as she extends her consciousness. The psychic defenses of the chamber hum, designed to contain any backlash. Slowly, carefully, she sends a tendril of thought, a delicate prove, towards the Slayer's mind. She expects a wall, a psychic labyrinth, or perhaps the chaotic madness of a demon-touched soul. She finds none of that. Instead, she finds a door, not a metaphorical one, but a very real psychic construct. It's a vast, brutalist gate of iron and fire, etched with symbols she doesn't recognize, symbols that scream of agony and retribution. There are no locks, no guards. It's almost inviting. This is her first mistake. She mistakes the lack of resistance for an opening. With a surge of confidence, she pushes her consciousness through the gate, and the universe breaks. What Lyra experiences in that nanosecond is not thought, not memory, not emotion. As a mortal mind understands it, it is an ocean, a supernova of pure, incandescent hatred. It's not the seething, corrupt ambition of chaos. This is different. This is righteous. It's the fury of 1 billion murdered souls. It's the grief of a world turned to ash. It's the singular, unending, and holy purpose of one man against an entire dimension of evil. She sees glimpses, flashes of a reality soaked in blood and sulfur. She witnesses the fall of Argentinur, not as a historical record, but as a personal memory. She feels the betrayal, the loss of his people, the death of his world. She experiences the eons spent in hell, not as a prisoner, but as the eternal hunter. Every demon he has ever torn apart, every soul he has ever avenged, she feels it all simultaneously. The sheer volume of this experience is a psychic shockwave. Her mind, a fortress that has stood against the temptations of Slaanesh and the madness of Zin, is instantly and utterly overwhelmed. The hatred she touches is so pure, so focused, it acts like a psychic acid. It has a weight, a gravity that crushes her own sense of self. It's not chaotic, it's the opposite. It is an absolute, unwavering constant in a universe of variables. It is the concept of vengeance given form. Back in the chamber, the scene is horrific. Lyra's eyes snap open, but they are milky white and boiling in their sockets. Blood pours from her nose, ears, and mouth. The psychic restraints around her overload and shatter, showering the room in sparks. She lets out a single, soul-shattering scream that is not entirely her own. It's a chorus of a billion vengeful ghosts, a symphony of damnation. Malric and his stormtroopers are thrown back by the psychic blast. The chamber's lights flicker and die. The only illumination comes from the unholy light emanating from the dying Psyche. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stops. Lyra collapses, her body limp. The Inquisitor rushes to her side, but he knows it's too late. Her mind is gone, utterly erased. As she takes her final, ragged breath, a single word, a psychic echo, whispers through the minds of everyone in the room. It's a word that chills Malric to his very soul, a word that perfectly encapsulates the abyss he just witnessed. Vengeance. Unending. The Psyche's brain has liquefied. Her neural pathways flash cooked by an energy that defies comprehension. Malric looks from the dead Psyche to the Slayer, who hasn't moved a muscle. He is still silent, still watching. But now, the Inquisitor understands. This being isn't a demon. It isn't a mutant or a heretic in the traditional sense. It's something far, far more terrifying. He has just witnessed a force of nature, an entity whose entire existence is forged from a singular, implacable purpose, a hatred so potent, so pure, that it has become a law of reality in itself. It is a hatred that doesn't bargain, doesn't corrupt, doesn't seek power for its own sake. It simply seeks to destroy. It's a force that stands in defiance, not just of the Imperium, but of the very nature of chaos itself. The great game of the Chaos Gods is just that, a game. But for the Slayer, TC's no game, it's a crusade. A one-man. Malric realizes with dawning horror that they haven't captured a monster. They have chained a living apocalypse. And the worst part, the Slayer's hatred isn't directed at them. Not yet. He's looking past them, through them, towards the true enemy. The Inquisitor now has a choice to make, one that could determine the fate of this entire sector, or perhaps even the galaxy. Do you try to control a hurricane, or do you simply point it at your enemies and pray you're not in the blast radius? The Slayer's existence is a paradox that the Imperium cannot comprehend. He is a man who walked into hell and became its master, not through corruption, but through sheer, unbreakable will. His rage is a fire that burns so brightly it purifies rather than taints. And as Malric stares into the visor of the Silent Warrior, he knows one thing for certain. The forces of chaos have a new, and perhaps ultimate, predator, and the galaxy will never be the same. What do you think? Could any Psyche, even the Emperor himself, survive a direct look into the Slayer's soul? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. This was a really fun one to explore, merging two of the most grimdark universes out there. If you enjoyed this dive into the lore, be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe for more. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the grim darkness of the 41st millennium collided with the sheer, unadulterated fury of the Doomslayer? Let's explore that electrifying what-if. Imagine, deep within the void, a lone warrior carving a path of destruction through the demonic legions of chaos. He moves with a speed and brutality that even a Primarch would respect. A green-clad figure of pure, righteous anger. To the scattered Imperial survivors who witness his rampage, he is a miracle, an avenging angel sent by the Emperor himself. But to the Adeptus Mechanicus, he is something far, far more interesting. It all starts with a flicker on a cogitator screen, an energy signature so potent, so utterly alien, that it sends ripples of excitement through the entire cult mechanic. From Mars to the most distant Forge worlds, Magi and tech priests gather around flickering hololiths, their bionic eyes wide with something akin to religious fervor. The signature isn't plasma, it isn't melta, it isn't even the esoteric power of the Necrons. It's something else entirely. Raw, refined, and impossibly efficient. It's the signature of the Doomslayer's arsenal. And to the Mechanicus, it sings a hymn of pure, divine technology. They dispatched their first skittery maniple, expecting a routine archaeotech recovery. The legionaries are hardened veterans, their flesh replaced with blessed steel, their minds networked for perfect combat efficiency. They track the energy source to a Daemon-infested space hulk, a graveyard of ships caught in the warp's embrace. They advance through corridors slick with ichor, their red robes a stark contrast to the oppressive gloom. Then, silence. The dead to tether goes dead. No distress call. No final data burst. Just an abrupt, chilling void. A follow-up team is sent, this time with Sicarian infiltrators and Castellan robots. They find the remains of the first team. Their skittery are not just broken. They are pulverized. Their sanctified chrome skulls are crushed like egg. The data slits wiped clean with a level of cyber warfare that baffles the sharpest logi. Panic doesn't exist in the Mechanicus vocabulary, but a new protocol is initiated. This isn't some Xenos scavenger. This is something far beyond their comprehension. The reports from Imperial Guard units and the few surviving Sisters of Battle, who VC in the entity in action, only add to the mystery. They speak of a silent warrior in green armor, a fleshless saint who fights with a fury that makes Khorne's own berserkers look tame. He tears demons apart with his bare hands. He moves like a blur, untouched by warp sorcery. His weapons defy all logic. This is where the interest of the machine cult turns into a holy obsession. The fabricator general of Mars himself takes notice. The whispers begin in the hallowed data vaults. Could this be it? A true avatar of the Omnisci, a being whose technology is not merely advanced, but God. The term is spoken with a reverence usually reserved for the Golden Throne itself. This fleshless scent possesses war gear that seems to violate the sacred laws of physics. His shotgun appears to channel localized reality. His plasma rifle fires projectiles of contained stellar matter, and the blade that extends from his arm. It cuts through demonic flesh and corrupted metal with an energy that leaves no scorch marks, only the pure, clean absence of what was there before. The Mechanicus must have it, not just to study it, but to worship it. This is not This is a new gospel. They assemble their most powerful forces, Legio Cybernetica Courts, Mage Dominus, wielding arcane relics. Even titans are put on standby. The objective is no longer recovery. It is a pilgrimage. They must reach the fleshless saint. They must commune with him, understand the divine engineering that drives him, and if necessary, retrieve his holy warger by any means necessary. For the glory of the machine god. They believe his technology is a gift from the Omnissiah, a key to unlocking the next stage of humanity's technological evolution. But they fail to understand the fundamental truth of the Doomslayer. He is not a machine to be disassembled or a saint to be worshipped. He is a force of nature, an instrument of vengeance. He doesn't care about their binary canticles or their desire for knowledge. He has one purpose: to rip and tear until it is done. As the Mechanicus expedition fleet translates into the war-torn system where the Slayer was last seen, they broadcast their message of Holy Communion, their request for an audience with the God Machine. They receive no reply, only the growing, terrifying signature of his rage, and the sudden, gut-wrenching realization that they have just become another obstacle between him and his prey. The demons cower, the tech priests pray, but the Slayer simply reloads. Their God-forged Messiah doesn't see acolytes seeking enlightenment. He sees obstacles. He sees corrupted metal and warped flesh, little different from the demons he hunts. The approaching skittery legions, with their augmented bodies and glowing bionics, might as well be a new flavor of Mancubes to him. The Mechanicus' greatest pilgrimage is about to become their greatest lesson in humility, delivered at the hands of the one being in the galaxy whose fury is as infinite as their faith. The machine god may be interested, but the fleshless saint is not, and his disinterest is far, far more dangerous. What do you think would happen next? Would the Mechanicus eventually capture a piece of his tech? Or would they just add their red robes to the trail of destruction he leaves across the galaxy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into a crossover vortex, make sure to like, subscribe. What if Optimus Prime, the noble leader of the Autobots, suddenly found himself in the grim, dark future of Warhammer 40,000? It's a question that sparks the imagination, blending two of the most iconic science fiction universes. Today, we're diving deep into an incredible piece of art that explores this very concept. A masterpiece that feels like a lost page from a forgotten Imperial history. Imagine this: a retro, propaganda-style poster, torn and aged, depicting a scene of utter chaos on a forged world. The style is pure, Warhammer, dark, gritty, and epic. But at the center of it all stands a figure both familiar and alien to this universe. Optimus Prime. This isn't the shiny, pristine hero we know from the cartoons. His red and blue armor is battle-scarred, chipped, and scorched by the fires of industry. Yet, his eyes glow with that unmistakable blue light of conviction, a beacon of hope in a galaxy that has none. He towers over the scene, a giant of metal and morality, amidst the burning forges of a world called Riser. Around him, the Adeptus Mechanicus, the tech priests of the Imperium, are in a state of sheer panic and fury. You can see the terror in their augmented eyes as they brandish their mechadendroids and aim their plasma rifles. To them, Prime is not a hero. He is an abomination, a man of iron, a sentient machine that defies the very core of their religion, the worship of the Omnisci, the machine god. He represents the ultimate technological heresy, a ghost from the dark age of technology that they have spent millennia trying to suppress. But look closer. In the background, something incredible is happening. The oppressed factory workers, the servitors, are rising up in rebellion. They are tearing off their masks of servitude, their faces illuminated by the blazing forges behind them. For the first time in centuries, perhaps millennia, they are tasting freedom. They see Optimus not as a heretical machine, but as a liberator. His very presence, his defiance, has ignited a spark of rebellion that threatens to consume the entire Forge world. And as if the scene wasn't chaotic enough, emerging from the smoke and fire are the Iron Hands Space Marines. Their black armor reflects the fiery pandemonium. The sons of Ferrus Manus, Marines who despise weakness and replace their own flesh with cold, hard steel. How would they react to Prime? Would they see him as a perversion of the machine, an insult to their augmented forms? Or would they, in their own cold, logical way, see a kindred spirit, a perfect synthesis of warrior and machine? The ambiguity is chilling. They march forward, a force of unrelenting order into a scene of pure anarchy. High above this maelstrom, the symbol of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Skalankog emblem, is cracking apart. It's bathed in a crimson light, shattering under the pressure of this single, impossible event. It is a powerful metaphor. The arrival of one righteous machine is enough to break a galaxy-spanning religion built on technological dogma. The old order is literally falling apart. The entire piece is drenched in harsh, dramatic lighting. Reds, oranges, and yellows dominate the palette, giving it the feel of a world on fire. The gritty, half-tone texture makes it feel like a genuine piece of propaganda you'd find pasted on a bulkhead in the Underhive. It's a snapshot of a pivotal moment, a single image that tells 1,000 stories. At the bottom, big, bold, distressed, text proclaims the central theme: the machine that defied the Omnisci. It's a headline that would send shockwaves through the Imperium. And below that, a smaller, glowing yellow subtitle gives us the name of this epic saga, Optimus Prime and the War for Riser. It feels like the title of a lost Horus Heresy novel, a conflict that could reshape the very fabric of the 41st millennium. This artwork does more than just match two franchises together. It creates a narrative that feels both authentic and revolutionary. It asks profound questions about faith, freedom, and the nature of sentience within the context of the 40,000 universe. What is the difference between a blessed machine spirit and a heretical, abominable intelligence? Optimus Prime, with his unwavering moral compass and his belief in the freedom of all sentient beings, is the ultimate challenge to the Imperium's rigid ideology. He is not just a machine, he's a leader, a symbol. In a universe where humanity is shackled by superstition and fear, Prime represents a different path. A path where technology serves life rather than enslaving it. The terrified tech priests see a monster from their darkest legends, but the rebelling workers see a savior. This duality is the heart of the conflict. The war for Riser wouldn't just be a battle of bolters and plasma. It would be a war of ideas. The dogma of the Mechanicus versus the philosophy of Prime. The cold logic of the Iron Hands versus the burning passion of the liberated masses. It's a conflict that could have repercussions far beyond a single planet, potentially igniting a schism within the cult Mechanicus itself. Could Optimus Prime survive in the 41st millennium? It's a brutal, unforgiving place. But this artwork suggests that not only could he survive, he could fundamentally change it. He could become a new legend, a new myth, the machine saint of a new, free generation, or the great beast that heralded a new age of darkness. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. This single image is a masterclass in visual storytelling. It's symbolic, emotional, and absolutely epic. It captures the grimdark tone of Warhammer 40K perfectly while injecting the noble spirit of Transformers. It's a crossover that feels earned, a story that demands to be told. It's a testament to the power of what if, and a beautiful, terrifying glimpse into a war that exists only in our collective imagination. What a masterpiece. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into this incredible piece of art. It's creations like this that keep our favorite universes feeling fresh and exciting. What do you think would happen in the war for Riser? Let me know your theories in the comments below. The air crackles, thick with the stench of ozone and otherworldly malevolence. Before the Doomslayer stands the Chaos Gate, a pulsating, screaming tear in the fabric of reality. It is a wound upon the universe, bleeding corruption, a beacon for the unspeakable horrors of the warp. For weeks, this hive city has been a charnel house. Its defenders turned to screaming puppets, or worse, its very stones corrupted by the seeping madness. But now, the silence is heavier than any battle cry. The demonic hordes are gone, reduced to ash and fading echoes by a singular, relentless force. The Slayer stands alone, his praetor suit scarred but unbroken, a testament to countless battles across countless worlds. In one gauntlet, he clutches a containment field, a swirling vortex of captured warp energy, stolen from the very heart of the demonic incursion. It writhes against its confinement, a miniature, furious nebula of pure chaos. This isn't just a weapon. It's a key, forged in hellfire, to lock a door that should never have been opened. He doesn't hesitate. There is no grand speech, no moment of reflection. There is only the mission. With a surge of inhuman strength, he slams the containment field into the gate's shimmering threshold. The impact isn't a sound. It's a feeling, a deep, bone-jarring throom that shakes the very foundations of the hive. The portal, which had been a stable, swirling vortex of malevolent color, begins to convulse. Reality groans in protest. The captured warp energy, a poison to its own source, is being force-fed back into the rift. It's like trying to extinguish a fire with gasoline, a paradox made manifest by sheer, indomitable will. The gate shrieks. It's a sound that transcends hearing, a psychic scream that claws at the minds of the few survivors huddled miles away. Tendrils of raw chaos lash out, tearing chunks of ferrocrete and plasteel from the surrounding structures, pulling them into the vortex like a black hole devouring stars. The sky, already a bruised purple, darkens to an impossible black. The Slayer stands his ground, a green-armored statue against the apocalypse. His boots magnetized to the deck as the very ground tries to tear itself away. He is the anchor, the focal point of the cataclysm he has initiated. He's overloading it. A voice crackles over the Voxnet. It's Inquisitor Malric. His face, a pale, sweat-streaked mask on a flickering pick screen in the distant command bunker. His team of Astartes and guardsmen can only watch, their instruments going haywire, their senses overwhelmed. By the throne, the energy readings are off the scale. He's weaponizing the Imperium against itself. Malric, a man who has witnessed the galaxy's greatest horrors, finds his voice trembling with a new kind of awe, a new kind of fear. The portal's convulsions intensify. It's no longer a gate. It's a dying god, thrashing in its death throes. Colors that have no name flash across its surface. Images of forgotten wars and futures that will never be flicker and die. The Slayer's armor glows with absorbed energy, vents hissing as they struggle to dissipate the impossible heat. He is a furnace at the heart of a supernova. The captured energy has created a feedback loop, a runaway reaction. The gate is not just closing, it's collapsing inward, tearing a hole in the universe to patch another. He tore reality apart. Just to close it, the thought, unspoken, hangs heavy in the air. This isn't a surgical strike, it's amputation with a chainsword. The only way to stop the infection is to destroy the limb, and the Hive City is that limb. The Slayer knew this. He always knows. The cost is irrelevant when weighed against the alternative. The mission is all, and his mission is eternal. With a final, deafening roar of tearing space-time, the implosion begins. It starts at the center of the rift, a point of absolute nothingness that expands with terrifying speed. There is no light, no fire, just a wave of pure oblivion. It doesn't explode outwards, it pulls inwards. Buildings, streets, entire blocks of Fu, third of the colossal Hive City are disintegrated, their matter unwritten from existence as they are dragged into the collapsing rift. The ground beneath the Slayer's feet vanishes, pulled into the void. For a fleeting moment, he is suspended in the maelstrom, framed against the swirling chaos of the collapsing portal. He turns, not towards the survivors, not towards the world he has just saved by partially destroying it, but towards the rift. Through the chaotic energies, for just a microsecond, a different vista is visible, a landscape of fire and blood, of eternal, cosmic war. His true home, his battlefield. We define our deliberate step. The Doomslayer walks forward. He doesn't fall into the rift, he enters it. He strides through the collapsing tier in reality, a king returning to his grim kingdom. The portal snaps shut behind him with a final, thunderous crack, sealing him away. The wave of destruction ceases instantly. The impossible blackness vanishes, replaced by a gaping, silent crater where a third of the city once stood. The silence that follows is absolute, more profound than any noise could ever be. In the command bunker, the pick screens are dark. The surviving soldiers and inquisitorial staff stand in stunned silence, trying to process the sheer scale of what they just witnessed. Inquisitor Malric walks to the main observatory window, staring out at the new, horrific landscape of his world. He looks at the void where the portal, the demons, and the Slayer had been. A single, whispered sentence escapes his lips, a chilling epitaph for the being who had just saved them. Even the warp fears him. The war for this world is over, but for the Doomslayer, his war beyond time has just resumed. He is the guardian at the edge of reality, the monster the other monsters fear, and his work is never, ever done. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the grim darkness of the far future, where even a force like the Doomslayer finds his eternal purpose. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, rip and tear that subscribe button, and ring the notification bell to join us for more epic tales. Let me know in the comments what you think of this crossover. Until next time, stay vigilant. Start of script. The dust settles on Moire, a planet once teeming with the shrieks of the damned, now cloaked in an eerie, profound silence. The echoes of battle have faded, replaced by the hushed whispers of awe and terror. The Inquisition, in its infinite, cautious wisdom, has descended upon the world. Quarantine protocols are enacted with chilling efficiency. No one enters. No one lives. The planet is now a tomb, a monument to a massacre so complete it has scrubbed the very air clean of taint. Vast, hulking vessels of the Adeptus Mechanicus hang in the bruised sky like patient metal vultures. Their tech priests, robed in crimson and chrome, descend to the surface. Their mission: to gather the remnants, the holy relics of the storm that has just passed. They move with reverent purpose, their optical sensors glowing in the dim light as they collect fragments of scorched, green-tinted armor. Each piece is a testament to an impossible fury, a sacred text written in the language of violence. They chant binary hymns, cataloging the impossible, trying to comprehend the force that had single-handedly purged a world. This wasn't merely a battle. It was an exorcism on a planetary scale. And so, the ecclesiarchy, the moral compass of the Imperium, bestows a new title upon the unknown warrior. He is no longer just a legend whispered among frightened guardsmen. He is canonized, sanctified. Name, Im, exorcist, Ultima the final cleanser, a saint of righteous slaughter, a holy warrior whose crusade was a single, deafening note of pure, unadulterated wrath against the horrors of the warp. His image, though never truly seen, is already being carved into the grand cathedrals of humanity. A faceless warrior in green armor, the embodiment of mankind is the most primal. Desperate need for a savior who will not bargain, will not falter, and will not stop. The priests of Mars analyze the fragments of his praetor suit. The material is unknown, defying their most advanced cogitators. The technology is alien, yet its purpose is terrifyingly clear. It is a weapon, a cage, and a conduit, all in one. A self-sustaining engine of destruction, powered by the very essence of the enemies it eradicates. It is a concept so heretical, so brilliant, that it borders on technosorcery. They record their findings in data slates sealed with the highest levels of clearance. Files that will be buried so deep they may never see the light of the Astronomicon again. The knowledge is too dangerous, the implications too vast. On Holy Terra itself, the High Lords convene in shadowed chambers. Reports from Moire Secundus are dissected, debated, and ultimately classified. An entire world lost to a full-scale demonic incursion, reclaimed in a matter of hours by a single entity. The official record will be scrubbed. The planet was lost, its population martyred, a heroic last stand. The truth is a paradox the Imperium cannot afford to acknowledge. How can one being, not sworn to the Emperor, wield such power against the archenemy? Is he a blessing or a curse, yet to be understood? He fought for humanity, but he was not of humanity as they knew it. A grizzled Inquisitor Lord, his face a roadmap of 1,000 secret wars, looks over the final report. He murmurs the words of a lone survivor, a guardsman driven half-mad by what he witnessed. The quote is appended to the file, a chilling epitaph. For the event. He was never a man, the guardsman had stammered, his eyes wide with a strange, terrible clarity. He was a message written in blood and fire, a declaration sent directly to the heart of chaos, a promise, and that message travels. It crosses the roiling, screaming tides of the warp, usually a cacophony of madness and despair, feels a new tremor. A ripple of something ancient and cold, something that predates the upstart gods of chaos. On worlds bathed in the sickly light of the Eye of Terror, demons, creatures born of nightmare, feel a chill that has no place in their fiery existence. The lesser ones scatter, hiding in the darkest corners of their realms. The greater ones, the princes and dukes of the abyss, pause in their eternal games. They whisper a name, not Exorcist Ultima, not the name given by men who could not comprehend what they saw. They whisper a name they learned in a time before time, a name seared into their very essence by a pain that never fades. The Slayer. They speak of his return. They remember the fall of their other masters, the ruin of other hells. They remember the sound of his Aprosius symphony of breaking bones and tearing flesh, set to the beat of a relentless, vengeful heart. The whispers spread. A new fear, an old fear, reawakened. The great game of the Chaos Gods, for a fleeting moment, is disrupted. Khorne, the blood god, might roar with approval at the sheer scale of the slaughter, but even he feels a flicker of unease. This was not the artful bloodshed of his champions. This was pest control. A cold, efficient eradication. Nurgle's garden withers slightly, the joyful pestilence receding from a presence so utterly sterile and full of hate for his creations. Tzench, the architect of fate, finds his intricate schemes tangled by a variable he cannot predict, a force of nature that defies all logic and planning. And Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, recoils from a being that knows no sensation but rage, no desire but to end all that they are. The message has been received. On Moire Secundus, the silence is a monument. In the halls of the Inquisition, it is a classified secret. In the forges of Mars, it is a technological anomaly. But in the warp, it is a promise of pain. The demons tremble not because a man has fought them, but because a force they thought was lost to their own twisted reality has found its way into this one. The Doomslayer has arrived in the 41st millennium, and for the forces of chaos, the true horror is just beginning. They know he is coming for them, and take know, with a certainty that chills their non-existent souls, that he will not stop. Not now, not ever.